Former President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed concerns over what he called the unchecked population growth in Nigeria, warning that it could pose significant challenges in future. In a statement released by his spokesman, Malam Garba Shehu, Buhari reflected on the massive crowds at the Eid prayers, highlighting the urgent need to address the issue of population expansion. He stressed the importance of preparing for the future by managing population growth responsibly to avoid overburdening future generations with insurmountable problems. The former president also called for a collective effort in increasing food production, expressing satisfaction that more Nigerians are taking up farming to combat rising food crises and achieve food security. But we are now being joined by the director at the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. Sam Amadi, to discuss the nexus between population increase and food security in Nigeria as enunciated by former President Buhari, and how Nigeria can harness its population for economic growth and national development. Dr. Sam Amadi, many thanks for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Now, I'm just wondering what you think, of the comments from President Muhammadu Buhari that uncontrolled population growth in the country should be a matter of concern to all. I think this begs the question, of what did the former president do about this during his tenure to address the same issue?
Well, first, generally, it looks like presidents and public officials, including myself, we get wiser after office. So it's a trend. Buhari is not perhaps the only person. So yes, we can ask what did he do, but obviously the answer is clear. He didn't do anything specific to address that. But again, let's look at the reasonableness of his concern. I think that in a sense, he is right to worry about growing population and dwindling food supply. If you look at it from an aggregate, total population, Nigeria, perhaps in the next decade, is estimated to be one of the fourth or even third most populated country in the world in a decade or more. And we could be getting to 500, half a billion people. That may not be too much of a worry, especially considering that our population is mostly young people and therefore expansive labor market. Unlike Europe and North America, particularly, we are concerns around what happens to Social Security, pension for elderly people who are not working, predictions that those funds are kind of depleting, and fiscal crisis sets in because of entitlements which are tied in by law. So many of these countries are worried about bankruptcy in terms of Social Security funds and how they'll meet the obligation. And again, a place like Japan, where maybe there's prospect of stagnation or even decline in GDP growth because of, population is very, very declining at fast rate. And there's been worry that maybe we should think about increasing population in those areas. So from that aggregate point of view, we may not have too much problem. What we have actually is a problem of productivity and economic growth. And then food sufficiency. And Prince is right to say we probably need to get more people working. But again, you need to have a strategic, well-laid-out agro plan. Some of the errors with agro-revolution or agro-reform that has happened in the past from Jonathan Akiwumi to Buhari and now is that there's so much focus on large holder farmers, corporate, big farms, making funds available to large farms. But again, if you look at Asia and how their own pathway to industrial development, they started with agro-reform and smallholder farmers who had their farms and who raised productivity. So the productivity of land, total productivity increased. And that per capita or per acreage of land, it got more with use of good extensive services, fertilizers and all that. So the question for us would be, are we really getting our young people back to the farm? Both commercial and in some commercial but small scale, smallholder farm. Not just for the employment and the income, you're going to see rural economy, kind of get back again. Today we have no rural economy if you go to Nigerian local governments, except those are in the urban area. You don't see rural economy. That means economic activity in those areas, generating income, not transfers from city areas, from Lagos or Abuja to those villages, but income generated from agro-business activities in those areas. We don't have that. And so there should be need now to say, having this large number of unemployed people, take for example Imo State with about 40-something% youth unemployment, you could turn that into expansive agro, turn it to farm, small gardens, small farms, big farms, medium farms. And so that's really what opportunity presents. And in that sense, the point is correct, even though you didn't do that. You look also the impact of population increase in terms of distributional inequality. So even if on the aggregate, population, if increased productivity, growing population may not be as Reverend Martus spoke many years ago, food increasing by arithmetical, product economy growing arithmetically and population growing geometrically, and then there will be a time that we will not have enough to feed. But with technologies, with improvement in management, in farm management, and agro-business, we might stave off that crisis where we can't feed ourselves. But the way we are going, that crisis is very imminent. Our food supply is declining, our export revenue is declining, and so we can't even import much. We can't even spend a lot to import food if we don't have. So we are at a point where about 35 million people are estimated to go real hunger, severe hunger and starvation in this year because of lack of food supply, expensive hike in food prices, growing demand for food, because more people means more demand for food and less supply. So it's really, if you have to contextualize it to see really that this is real threats. From an aggregate point, maybe it doesn't look much, but from looking at also families and say, how will these families with lower income, household income, be able to take care of food supply if they have 6, 7 children? So there's also need at a micro level to begin to talk about family control, not in the way China perhaps did by decreeing, one child or one couple, one child, but in a way that we discourage, over, if you like, production, which is the wrong word, but, we shouldn't have there's no time to have too many children, because at the level of disaggregated, at the level of households, we're going to see more poverty, more misery and deprivation, because average household will not be able to take care of many more children. And a level of aggregate with low productivity, and that's nothing seems to be showing that we're going to ramp up productivity in a couple of years. We're going to see perhaps much more conflicts. We're going to see poverty. We're going to see, vagrancy, and all kinds of social problems. So I think it's really a serious concern the parent raised. And maybe he didn't do anything about it, but that shouldn't stop us from thinking about what should be done.
Now, Dr. Sam Amadi, you talked about population control, but I'm wondering how easy that will be, especially when we consider the religious and cultural sentiments of some citizens. How easy will it be to achieve population control in Nigeria?
I think it would be extremely difficult, and that's why the idea of development should be transformation. You see, and that's the inconsistency and the problem. We always talk glibly about development. We don't know that development has some sense in which it equals change. Change in the norms, in the practices. For example, a transformation will require, maybe we'll put more women, female, into work, enable women get child schooling, enable them to also acquire skills, enable them to be part of the productive class. So if we, for religious or cultural or other sentimental reason, would not allow our gay children, for example, to be part of the productive class, then we are constraining economic development. And so you can't have it either way. You can't eat, you can't have it. We can't say, as classical case in which Friedman put it, the Lexus or the olive tree. The Lexus symbolizing innovation, technology-driven innovation, and the olive tree symbolizing the panting after tradition, about our father's household, we want things to the way it is, culture, tradition. So in a way, leadership And transformation, development means change. And that one of the change that should happen, the change that we need to understand that there is really a connection between large family size for at a micro level with low quality of livelihood. So if we're going to have a man and a wife, or a wife and his husband have 8 children in this economy, for example, and then we look at distributional fairness, it's not there. We look at lack of social protection. So it's not like a welfare state where the state takes care of children, takes care of education and healthcare, basic healthcare, access to healthcare. Then there's no way you're going to have development in that way, because those children who are not well trained, who are not catered for, who have nutritional imbalance at early stage, are going to be less productive, less capable, low skill, low competence to create wealth in the future. So both at a personal level, those families will be thrown into acute poverty. But at aggregate level, you're going to have less productivity. And that's why investment, most of the developed economies at historical periods made massive investments in improving nutrition, access to healthcare, education. And so if the country has more children and not able to cover them with social protection, with quality of education, early schooling, good nutrition, so that they grow into smart, intelligent, and functional, and effective citizens. Then, both at the micro level and the macro, we are losing. And so it seems to me that, yes, it's going to be difficult, but we must be creative to find champions among religious communities, cultural leaders, who will say, and clearly, textually, there's nothing in the text that says we should have more children that we can take care of. But maybe our ignorance and the way religious texts, both Bible, Quran, and others, may have been appropriated and used, may have created a problem. But we need to be bullish and say, you know what, we have to pass that message that we cannot keep on, having more children at or aggregate level without focusing on expanded resources. And again, at household level, we cannot have children who cannot, be properly educated, nurtured, and able to create their own wealth and their own future in today's world. More so for a country that has no established social protection scheme. So I think it's a bullet we have to bite. And if we don't bite that bullet, then we shouldn't, realistically expect that we're going to have improvement in quality of life in large scale and also in terms of individual households. So we might see, or we should expect more poverty, we should expect more starvation, the way at the level of economic growth and the level of fairness of distribution of the available resources and at the level of increase in population, rate of increase in population.
Now, Dr. Amadi, while expressing concern about Nigeria's growing population, shouldn't the former president also be worried about the security situation in the country? Because without addressing the issue of insecurity, are we not just paying lip service to boosting food production in Nigeria?
Yes, I think that's why development is composite. There's the linkages between various aspects. So take, for example, food production, which builds back to food security, and is tied or kind of subjected to security as a whole. So if we don't have security as we don't have today, it might be difficult to talk about food production. In fact, part of the main explanation for why we have hikes in food prices, food inflation, about maybe 40-something% now, or 43%, I guess, from the CBN MBS latest report, is because of insecurity. So if we don't deal with insecurity, then we cannot guarantee food supply. And so even if we're not growing at a rate that we are predicted, the population increase, the rate of increase, even if it is not as high as it is, we still will not be able to feed ourselves because the food supply will be less. And the economic downturn means that even government has said they're going to import, they will also be constrained in the amount of food they can import, because importation also, further damages the balance of trade and the deficit that's in our economy. So I think that wrestling down the demon of insecurity is key to expanding food supply. Again, if you're talking about getting the able-bodied youths back, to farming, either at commercial or at small-scale level, it presupposes that there will be enough security to go to the farms in the first place, enough security to have clear transport system that allows food to get to, markets quick and with less cost and with more value. So all of the value chain of agriculture, whether planting, harvesting, processing, transportation, market, it requires a significant degree of security. And the way the country is today, with generalized insecurity, especially around the food belt, Benue Valley, the north of Nigeria, and even down to the south, it tells a story that, look, it's like double whammy. So, catch two. It cut this way, if you don't cut everything together. So we can't just talk about improving food supply without also talking about improving security. And the fact that since 2013, at least, that we started suffering very pronounced attack from bandits and terrorists, religious terrorists, and later killer herdsmen, and now insurgent groups across the country. We've not been able to kind of find a way to contain, control, and minimize, not even eliminate this threat. The fact that we've proved very, unsuccessful in dealing with these security threats that we are faced with since 2013 suggests that it doesn't give hope that we could do that quickly in the next couple of days. And the more the insecurity continues, the more the prospect of food sufficiency, vanishes. Because look, it deteriorates, and then it becomes more difficult to reverse. And then there's flight away from rural areas, communities that are under siege, to townships that are perhaps much more, a little bit safer. And that means you have lost the manpower that will do the farming, even at the subsistence level. So clearly, insecurity is a big challenge, dealing with both economic stagnation and specifically, food supply.
Just before we let you go, Dr. Amadi, some analysts would argue that Nigeria's population is more of a blessing than a curse. If only our leaders can be more sincere and visionary in their approach to governance. So I'm wondering, how can we harness this country's large population to drive economic growth and national development?
I think I started by saying that, look, on aggregate, maybe it's not a bad thing that we have, because we have youthful population. About 40 to 50% of our population are young persons, made up of young persons who, look, there is a global, the source of wealth creation today in the world, apart from raw material, natural resource, which leads to conflict and which has not paid off for countries like Congo, Nigeria, and other places. The next is human capital, the fight over innovation, around innovation, human capital. So the human capital struggle, the struggle to have the best trained, competent human beings, is actually strategic for engagement of nations in their fight for economic and social dominance. So Nigeria has not been doing that well. Look at the educational sector. Look at our informal learning. Look at the social structure, the ideas and values in which both the institutions of learning and other social formation platforms imbue our young people. So we lack that human capital. We have the numbers, but we don't have the skill sets required for economic development. We lack, oftentimes Nigeria pride themselves that we're very smart people. Yes, we are smart people, and so we get results from Oxford, Stanford, Yale, where Nigerians probably migrate to, and they are first in their class. But that's not really the human capital Nigeria needs. You need a human capital that's localized. You need to have social production of competence and skills, and that's what fits into what we call learning by doing. So the technological spill-off that drives economic development has to be localized. It has to be how Nigerian universities are showing up in the ranking, how they are doing with PISA, the program on science and mathematics, how are they doing on those standardized tests, how are our schools doing in terms of how they feed industries, the service sector with skilled managers, with analysts and all that. So that's where we are lacking. And like the NYSC, like I spoke here before, should be reconceived as a human development platform, so that when we get these young people from the universities. We use 1 extra year, like a finishing school, to give them the competence to survive in a global job hunt. You know, the way the world has changed under the new globalization is that with work now being online, work being, you know, off physical offices, we're going to see companies all over the world hire people no matter where they are. So Nigerians can also help to make our young people, you know, employable, more employable globally, sitting in Nigeria and creating wealth and earning income. Beyond that, in terms of, you know, getting our people to have, you know, be employed, whether in Nigeria or globally, it's also the fact that they can also become part of an entrepreneurial class that is helping locally. And then that's how, you know, technology drives. Technology is not you import a few smart people or you export few smart people elsewhere. It means that the economy-wide upgrade in competence and skills, and that upgrade in one sector knocks on another sector and therefore creates a bubble, a kind of momentum and economic growth. So I think that it could be a blessing, but we need to intentionally begin to create a meritocratic society, begin to, you know, focus on competencies and, you know, show it by preferences. So for example, in appointments, in how we reward our people, we are intentional on the fact that we want our people to have competence and to show those competences. So if you reinforce it through your public sector hiring, then that could spur up, you know, it becomes an advantage. You turn it from a youth bubble, becomes a youth gain, but it could also be a youth violence, youth discontentment, NSAS, and several other things can flow from having a youthful population if not well managed.
Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.